This film documents the Vietnam War in the words of Americans who served there. It features home movies and rare archival footage collected during a worldwide search, and now presented in high definition. Many scenes are graphic in nature, and viewer discretion is advised.
Too, fella, and I served for years. I know what it's about.
I have a son that's going to go into the army.
We fight because we must fight. If we're to live in a world where every country can shape its own destiny, we will not be defeated.
U.S. victory over the North Vietnamese in the Nha Drang Valley, measured by a kill ratio of 12-1, convinces U.S. commanders to implement a new strategy: search and destroy. The plan is brutally simple. Search out the enemy in South Vietnam and then destroy them in numbers so high they will no longer be able to continue fighting. First time in modern U.S. military history, victory in war will be measured not by territory taken, but by body count. But as U.S. and South Vietnamese forces battle through the vast countryside and winding rivers, they quickly discover that the enemy has a plan of their own. The Viet Cong have meticulously planted tens of thousands of mines and booby traps. They have dug hundreds of miles of tunnels to move soldiers and weapons and launch surprise attacks. And perhaps worst of all, they hide in plain sight, indistinguishable from the 17 million civilians. If they are to win the war, U.S. leaders realize they need an enormous number of boots on the ground. 1966 becomes the year of escalation.
When we graduated, one of the commencement speakers quoted President Kennedy, saying we should ask not what our country can do for us, but ask what we can do for our country. Well, the more I hear about Vietnam, the more I think I'm finally starting to understand what those words mean.
In San Bernardino, California, Barry Romo is feeling the effects of the growing war.
And this sort of led me to thinking about,
well, if I believe in the war, then I have to actually join the military and go and fight. really put my principles into action. When I told my father I was going to enlist, he said, I don't want you to go. And I said, well, you served. He said, but your brother and I went to war to fight people who were putting other human beings in ovens. All you're going to do is go fight some poor farmer that doesn't want to be bothered with you, and I don't want you to die.
But he doesn't know what he's talking about. We're in Vietnam to save those farmers from the communists. That's what this war is about. Everybody knows that, and everybody's behind it. So I tell him, sorry, Pops. Regardless of what you think, I'm enlisting in the Army. And I'm volunteering to go to Vietnam.
As Romo undergoes his 12 months of training, he has no idea what Vietnam will really be like. No more than 28-year-old Charles Brown has, even after serving 8 years in the peacetime army.
A few months ago, I didn't even know any of these men existed. Now headed into combat together, and we're gonna have to depend on each other to survive. Well, back when I was at Fort Benning training up young men that was going to
Vietnam, one of my favorite slogan was, I'm gonna go to Vietnam. I'm gonna kill some Viet Cong. Ha! Well, this take effect on you. Remember now, I've been drilled for a good 8 years with nothing but talking about combat. Not that I wanted to experience, but it had become a way of life. There's certain things you do and how you do it. And actually combat is the only way this is going to be tested.
Brown is now second in command to a platoon of 30 men with the 173rd Airborne Brigade sweeping through Tay Ninh province, a known Viet Cong stronghold.
A lot of my guys are from places like New York and Chicago. Boys have barely been out the city, let alone been out in the middle of a jungle like this. No matter how much training they got, Vietnam, it's a whole different world to them.
Summer daytime temperatures average over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while a 100% humidity is like being in a steam bath 24/7. The men must cut their way through 8-foot-tall, razor-sharp elephant grass and bamboo covered in thick, thorny vines. But this is only part of the problem. The countryside is also infested with thousands of poisonous insects and snakes, including one of the deadliest in the world, known as the two-step snake, for the number of steps a bite victim can take before dropping dead. Brown and his men must navigate this treacherous terrain under the constant threat of ambushes and booby traps, looking for any signs of the elusive Viet Cong.
Our first run will be 170.
A couple of hooches up ahead. I tell my radio man to call back to camp and tell him we're gonna search it fast for nightfall.
1481, break.
Keep going.
A couple of my guys start bitching, want to know why the hell we can't just skip it. But I tell them this is a job, so they better buckle down and get it done.
As Brown and his men enter the area, they quickly realize it's an abandoned Viet Cong encampment. The VC have a sophisticated network of scouts and sympathizers who alert them to the Americans' presence, allowing them to choose when and where they want to fight. The best the Americans can do now is destroy any hidden enemy weapons or supplies they can find.
I always tell these guys you gotta go slow. You gotta take your time, go through these things. But none of them listen to me. All they want to do is get done and get back to camp. This one guy, he thinks he's been out here so long he knows everything there is to know. So what does he do? Instead of him going down into the rice slowly
to see if anything was in it, he tilt the rice, immediately seeing what we would call a pressure release booby trap.
The booby trap blasts Brown and 2 of his men with shrapnel. Within minutes, a medevac chopper is en route to take them to one of the 18 military hospitals in Vietnam.
The emergency call indicated that there are 3 injured, wounded GIs. We're on our way, flying above what has to be considered insecure, hostile territory.
Hold on. I want you to keep calling.
Okay, we've got our 3 wounded GIs on board. At least one of them is hit pretty bad. We took a little fire on the way out of this pickup area.
About search and destroy missions and ambushes, and even practiced them in officer candidate school and other places. But the reality of actually going out is a totally different thing. It's not like the movies where you go out in the field and then that evening you're back in a base camp drinking beer or smoking dope. We would go out 30, 35, 40 days at a time, 24/7.
In July of 1967, 19-year-old Second Lieutenant Barry Romo arrives in Vietnam. He replaces a platoon leader who was critically wounded by a landmine during a search and destroy operation. Now, Romo is in Quang Nam province, 300 miles north of where Charles Brown was wounded, leading his platoon of approximately 30 men on a similar mission with similar dangers.
It's the not knowing that gets to you. The feeling that you're never safe, anywhere, at any time. Suddenly mortars and gunfire are flying in from everywhere. No one knows what the hell is going on or where the enemy's even at. I start screaming at my men to get down and form a defensive perimeter. But everyone's yelling and shooting. And then I realize one of my squads got stuck between us and the enemy. They're caught in the crossfire, getting hit from both directions. I gotta do something, so I yell for cover, and I run forward as fast as I can to my squad. They're all injured. And every man was badly wounded.
And 2 of my men were dead. And one of my men had been thrown 100 feet, maybe, by concussion. And his insides were jellified. And I saw that I had to get him out of there.
I have to get them out of there or more people are gonna die. Medevac doesn't want to land because we're taking too much fire. But I scream into the radio and I tell them, I'm gonna stand up in the middle of this damn field and you better get in here and get my men out. When it's finally over and we get back to the platoon,
my company commander said, I'm going to put you in for Bronze Star. In my mind, I could only picture a Bronze Star for my dead men. And it didn't seem worth it. It didn't seem fair that people should die for me to get a medal.
As U.S. losses begin to mount, President Johnson reminds the American people that the war is not only about stopping the spread of communism. There is an even greater cause worth fighting for in Vietnam.
Every American must know exactly what it is that we are trying to do in Vietnam. Our greatest resource, really, in this conflict is your understanding.
By the summer of 1967, the United States is sending more than $500 million in aid to South Vietnam. More than 1.5 million children are attending hundreds of new schools. And for the first time, hundreds of thousands of poverty-stricken civilians are receiving modern medical care.
Here's a goal that's worthy of the deeds of our brave men. The people of Asia do matter. And I pledge to all those that are counting on us, you can depend upon us. Because all Americans will do our part.
As long as Ben and I have been married, our lives have been run by the Army. But I guess that's the price you pay for falling in love with a military man.
Ann Purcell married Ben, a career military officer, in 1951. After 16 years of marriage, 5 children, and many moves, they are living in Boonville, Missouri, where he is stationed as a colonel.
Ben and I both know he'll be going to Vietnam sooner or later. So we figure if he volunteers to go to Vietnam, the family has a choice as to where they stay.
The family had a choice as to where they stayed, and we would stay in Boonville because it was already like home, having lived there 4 years. I dreaded seeing him go, but I knew that was his duty. And so I just accepted it that way.
Right before we leave to see Ben off, he surprises me with a pair of audio recorders. He's gonna take one to Vietnam with him, and I'll keep the other so we can record tapes and mail them back and forth. When we get to the airport, I give Ben one last kiss. And tell him he better try out that recorder as soon as he gets there. And let me know that everything's okay.
But the war Colonel Purcell is about to join is not going as planned. Although U.S. forces conduct hundreds of search and destroy operations, including massive sweeps involving up to 30,000 soldiers at a time, the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong are elusive, refusing to engage in lockdown, drawn-out combat. Finally, near the end of October 1967, U.S. forces locate 6,000 North Vietnamese soldiers massing near the American base at Dak To in Kon Tum province. More than 6,500 U.S. and South Vietnamese soldiers, along with attack helicopters, fighter bombers, and the mightiest aircraft in the U.S. arsenal, the B-52 bomber, are deployed to the region. November 3rd, 1967, shortly after mid-morning, the first group of 3 B-52s prepares to unleash nearly 6 tons of high explosives before the ground troops move in. The largest clash with the NVA since the Ya Drang Valley begins.
Have been coming in overhead. You can feel the ground shaking like jello.
Sergeant Charles Brown has recovered from his wounds and is back with the 173rd Airborne Brigade on his way to relieve American units engaged in heavy combat outside of Dak To.
We can hear the gunfire as we get closer. The sounds of M16s and AK-47s ripping through the jungle. The sounds of trees splintering. Men scream.
410, go.
A few paces ahead, the recon team radios back. We walked right into an ambush. Now they stuck out there only a few meters ahead of us, screaming for help. Just got to do something fast before they all get killed. CO jumps on the radio and tells them to hit the ground and stay down. Then he turns to me and instructs me to take
the rest of the platoon in to see what was going on. Knowing that my men in there was down, we went in firing from the waist up, just spraying the whole area. Brown Charles J., Staff Sergeant E6, awarded. Bronze Star Medal, First Oak Leaf Cluster, with V device. Reason for heroism in connection with military operation against an hostile force. Near Dak To, Republic of Vietnam.
After 3 weeks of fighting, U.S. and South Vietnamese forces have stopped the NVA from destroying the American base at Dak To. But of the 6,000 enemy soldiers spotted in the area, only an estimated 600 were killed. The remaining 5,400 are making a strategic retreat toward Laos and Cambodia. Diplomatic policy prohibits U.S. ground troops from crossing the border, hoping to stop the NVA before they escape. The Americans give chase.
Let's go, Bravo!
On November 19, 1967, U.S. soldiers pinned down 2,000 NVA on an 875-meter-high hill known as Hill 875, just 6 kilometers from Cambodia.
Do you have any idea what kind of fire we have on this going against the station?
They are immediately ordered to take the hill.
Ain't no such thing as rest for the weary. 2,000 NVA are on Hill 875. The man wants us to go hunt them all down.
Into the assault, Sergeant Charles Brown and his battalion are helicoptered to Hill 875 to join the fight. They are dropped in a safe zone, just out of range of enemy fire.
The entire place already looks like hell from all the fighting. Trees are splintered and broken, smoke billows in the distance. You can see this is a completely
destroyed area. Trees gone, nothing to hide on, just a whole unbelievable how it had been destroyed.
As Brown and his men make their way towards the American units, they have no idea of the horrors that lay ahead. The NVA have transformed Hill 875 into a heavily fortified stronghold, brimming with pre-built bunkers and carefully carved out escape routes. It's a cunning trap that the Americans are walking right into.
As we head into the twilight, we can hear the mortar and artillery shells exploding a few miles out in front of us. Up ahead, men start whispering back whenever they come across a dead body. Pretty soon, seems like all you hear is body, body, body.
When the truth is found to be lies, and all the joy within you.
5 hours ago, we're out there in the middle of the bush. Now I'm cracking open a warm beer while some chick shakes her butt.
300 miles to the north, 2nd Lieutenant Barry Romo and his platoon are on a 2-day break after being in the field for 30 straight days of search and destroy.
I guess this is one of the crazy things about Vietnam. One minute you're out there freaking out about tripwires and booby traps. And the next thing you know, they fly you into a rear area where they take away our weapons and our hand grenades.
And our hand grenades, and they would plop us on a beach like in Apocalypse Now and have a big barbecue, and you would drink, and they would bring in tons of alcohol. And then after 2 days, they would pour you back into helicopters, give you your weapons back
and fly you out to an area for another operation for another 30 days. It's so bizarre. All anyone knows is that no one has any idea what will happen next. I had an officer in training that once said, "The Viet Cong guerrillas are the fish in the sea of the people, and our job is to dry up that sea." I thought he was crazy for saying that. But now that I've been out here for a few months, I'm starting to see what he meant.
Second Lieutenant Barry Romo is back in the field, searching a South Vietnamese village. Civilians sympathetic to the Viet Cong hide weapons and supplies, while those who side with the Americans stay silent for fear of brutal communist reprisals. As a result, the Americans cannot tell friend from foe, leaving the villagers caught in the middle.
We're told the VC threaten these people with their lives unless they help them. So you gotta figure it's not really their fault. But at the same time, when you find a bunch of AK-47s hidden in some villager's chicken pen, you can't help but feel like they're the reason your buddies are dead. I mean, these are supposed to be the people we're here to help. Only it seems like they don't give a shit about helping us. I've never once had a Vietnamese say, don't go down this trail.
Because there's a mine. Or don't go over to this area because the North Vietnamese are going to ambush you. Your morality wears down. Your patience wears down. After a while, people started blaming the Vietnamese for our casualties, all the Vietnamese. And there's a genuine dehumanization of the people we were supposedly there to help.
This isn't like my dad's war. We aren't fighting uniformed Nazis on our way to Berlin. Out here, we gotta figure things out every day as it's happening. So given a choice between your buddy living and one of those villagers living, you know who you're gonna pick. Because that's just the way it is. And all any of us want to do is get out of here and get back home alive.
Everybody again up into this area.
I think I got some pedal back. I'm going to try to put it down right now.
Every time one of these birds tries to come in with supplies, NVA shoots them up. We already got 2 birds shot down.
Sergeant Charles Brown and the 173rd Airborne Brigade are pinned down on the side of Hill 875. Over the past 48 hours, U.S. and South Vietnamese forces have made several attempts to take the hill. So far, all they have to show for their efforts are mounting numbers of dead and wounded.
Hold on.
North Vietnamese are dug in.
And dug in deep. We're going to have to burn them out. Each platoon was ordered to send a man forward to our little rear camp to learn, be familiar with the operations of a flamethrower. And I ordered one of my replacements, Billy Cupid, he was kind of stocky, black kid from Chicago. And I told him, get familiar with the flamethrower.
Flamethrowers in hand, U.S. forces prepare for their final push up Hill 875.
I order my men to get into position. All of a sudden, mortars and rocket fires start coming down on us. 105s are screaming overhead, and men are shouting and firing. Smoke starts clogging my lungs, and the sounds of small arms and machine guns fire rips through me.
As we charged the hill with the flamethrower on his back, that pressure tank was hit with a piece of shrapnel, and the concussion of it killed Billy.
Just for a moment, I'm frozen with the unbelievable sight of a man dying right in front of me. But then the incoming fire snaps me out of it. It's constant and coming from everywhere. Seemed little strategy left other than move forward and kill anything in front of you. Choppers have landed since we took the hill. And all they brought is the bare necessities. Ammo, water, rations, and body bags. Lots of them.
On November 23rd, 1967, after 5 days of harrowing close-quarters combat, U.S. forces, including Sergeant Charles Brown and his company, finally take Hill 875. 115 Americans have been killed, and another 253 wounded. Combined with the casualties from the previous 3 weeks, Brown's 173rd Brigade has lost nearly 1/5 of its total fighting strength.
Medics are making their way to wounded troopers, giving them sips of water or shots of morphine. You gotta admire them. A lot of these boys ain't no more than 18, 19 years old. But they fought better and harder than anything I could have ever hoped for. They fought like the well-disciplined professional soldiers they were trained to be. Just like the soldiers I had trained them to be.
Despite their success in courageously taking the hill, the American soldiers are unable to achieve the primary goal, killing all of the enemy soldiers in Kon Tum province. Of the 6,000 North Vietnamese originally spotted, only some 1,400 were killed. The rest escaped into Laos and Cambodia the night before the final assault. 6 days after spilling so much blood to take it, U.S. forces leave Hill 875. In the strategy of search and destroy, victory is measured by enemy bodies, not territory. Hill 875 is now considered worthless.
take us long to realize ain't no Iwo Jimas in Vietnam. We don't get to plant our flag and claim victory. But we know we've done
We had done what we was assigned to do. We knew we were superior. We knew we had killed all that was up there. We didn't know at that time that some had left. But that was one of the myths of Vietnam. Each time you take a piece of ground, we left it, and they returned to that same piece of ground. But we left the hill as heroes. We finally captured Hill 875. That's the way we left it. We were heroes. Lost some buddies, lost some men, yes. But we defeated the enemy on Hill 875.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it.
Faced with only the cold, hard numbers of body count, the American public has a difficult time seeing measurable progress in Vietnam. But with nearly 500,000 soldiers overseas, President Johnson and his generals are convinced that they have turned the corner. They launch a massive campaign designed to reinvigorate public support for the war and demonstrate that victory is on the horizon, so long as the American public doesn't give up so close to the finish line.
I could quote a number of meaningful statistics, such as the roads that are being opened, the number of weapons being captured, and other statistical information which suggests that we are making progress and we are winning.
Today I can tell you that military progress in the past 12 months has exceeded our expectations.
And so I report to you that we are going to continue to press forward. We will provide all that our brave men require to do the job that must be done. Let the world know that the keepers of peace will endure through every trial, and that with the full backing of their country, they are going to prevail.